G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Just getting the washing out of camera view. That's better. G'day, how are you? Look, welcome tonight. How are you all going? Look, this video I think is an incredibly important topic. And it's one that I kind of touch on in different ways in different videos that I have, but I've never actually spelt it out as clearly, as plainly as I want to spell it out in this video. And it's so important because I think if we get this wrong, it's going to tremendously hinder our improvement. It's going to tremendously sidetrack us, distract us, put us in the wrong place. And as we can't progress the way in our mind we're seeing perhaps other people do or other people already have, and we look at our work and we think it's just staying the same with all the same problems, then the level of discouragement that can build up can be enough to make us want to give up. And I really think it's to do with the wrong focus. Now, when I talk about focus, I'm really talking about just two different focus we can have. Is it foci? I don't know, focuses. Two different focuses we can have. It's dividing all the skills that we might use, need, consider in learning to draw into two main areas. And I think the problem is we intuitively, more naturally, focus on one area. And I think this is particularly going to be a problem if we're a self-taught artist and we're going to be our own teacher as well. Because I think the way we navigate that in this day and age can very much lead us to go down one of the focus only and ignore the one that actually I've come to believe is the really key one, the really key element in all this. So what are they? What are they? And look, can I say this has a really important ramification for what YouTube videos we might watch if we're learning to draw. Because if we watch ones that are positioned in the less helpful side of the fence, if you like, then we're going to really struggle to see the improvement that we're after. And I'd be interested to see in the chat. Hi there, me too. Hi there, Ali. I'd love to see in the chat your thoughts, your reflections on this, and possibly even your own frustrations with your drawing improvement. Is improvement in your drawing something that you're currently frustrated about? I would like to hear that. G'day, baby John. Okay. Look, I think this focus in the wrong place comes about because very naturally when we start to learn to draw, or before we even start to learn to draw, but when we're just thinking, I'd like to learn to draw, well, we're very focused on the drawing, on the end result. We see drawings that other people have done and we think, look, this is great. I'd love to be able to do this. And regardless of what they draw with pencil, pen, and regardless of the method they use, we see these drawings and we think, there's something in us that stirs and for some reason makes us, as opposed to other people, think, well, I've got this in me. I think I can do that. And let me say, if we feel that we have it within us, there's every chance that we do. So I think that's reason enough to start to explore the possibilities of learning to draw. Hi there, Akita and Tejas. So, but the problem is, yeah, we look at these drawings, and what we see, I should have brought a drawing that I can hold up as an example. Gosh, yes, there is one just here. It's on the wall because my wife liked it because it's flowers. There you go, some flowers. But we see the finished drawing, and what we see are the lines. We see the marks that the artist has used. And so the challenge for us is to create these marks ourselves on the paper when we have our pen. And that sounds all very straightforward. So what I have to learn to do is I have to learn how to put these marks on the paper, how to draw the lines. And so that's my focus. Um, and so I'm looking at the skills that I need. And so if I'm self-taught, if I'm navigating YouTube videos myself or reading material or whatever, I'm thinking I need to watch things that teach me how to draw the lines. So the focus, and I'll say pen because I draw with a pen mostly these days, but it doesn't matter what you're drawing with, charcoal, whatever. And so my focus is I need to somehow learn this skill to draw, well, certainly the straight lines straight, long straight lines, if I need long straight lines for what I draw. I need to learn how to do lines that will draw fur if I like to draw animals, or hair if I do people, how I represent foliage on leaves or plants, how I can draw a landscape, whatever it is, streetscape, whatever it is I want to draw. My focus is on the lines, is on producing the lines, the marks, and 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 somehow getting them on the paper. And I think, very much I need to train my hand. I need to improve my drawing skills, and so I'm very drawn to videos or reading material that's to do with, you know, tips, techniques, hacks, ways to draw a straight line without a ruler. These sorts of things that I call the technical skills. They're the actual skills that, in a sense, we train our hand to have, or our arm, or whatever. We learn the way that when we have a pen in our hand, we can get the lines and the marks where we want to put them. And we think that that's what it's about. And I would say that that side of the fence, of the drawing fence, I don't know, 20% max for importance. The problem is it's a lot more than 20% of our time. And I would hate to say, but probably for some people, it's 95% of our time. And that's actually the heart of the problem. So, and so if in our drawing we're continuously reinforcing the same mistakes, if regardless of all the tips and hacks and tricks and magic videos that we watch, and the number of exercises we do drawing straight lines to develop the skill of drawing straight lines, if in doing this my drawing still has the same problems over and over again, then I think it's a very definite indication that we're focused on the wrong side. We're focused on the technical skills, and merely practicing technical skills in this way won't give us, I don't believe, what we need to really um, develop our drawing style, and to improve as we do that. So, um, what what is it? What is it that now that we're 7.5 minutes in, what is it that is the focus we should have? And I have two words that I use to describe the two different ways we can focus. We've talked briefly about what I call the hand focus. In other words, the things I actually do physically when I have a pen in my hand. And that obviously is important because that does create, in the final phase, the drawing. But what comes before that is the brain side. And it's the brain side that I think 85% of my drawing comes from. And it's easy to think, oh, is that all? I know about that. Well, I would say that if you look at your drawings over a period of time and they're not improving, then maybe you don't really know it as much as you think, because the skills, and I use the word skills, the skills that we need to use our brain for when we're preparing to put marks on a bit of paper with a pen are very different for most people from the skills that they've developed their brain to be able to do for everyday life. We simply don't need to do the same sort of thinking to navigate through a typical day as we do if we're drawing. And I think, but because we do navigate through our day and we don't know what we don't know, we think that we have adequate, if you like, brain preparation, brain drawing to draw well. Because in the end, what we do flows from how we think. And if we're not thinking the right way, then we're not going to be able to push our actual technical skills into line past where our thinking has developed, where our thinking has allowed us to be. And if I look back at my own drawing journey, which really only started in 2018, I've really only been drawing for 5 years, although I did paint for 10 years before that, which did help me a lot with my drawing, I discovered, to my surprise, when I started to draw, because in order to paint, I had to actually develop a lot of the brain skills, because there is a lot of overlap in the brain skills that we need to paint, that we need to draw. And I didn't realize that. But I did become very aware that I could push faster than I expected to with the drawing. And it's because I was actually having to apply skills I'd already learned to something different, but I already had them as a context in my head. Um, so what are the brain things that I'm talking about? Well, they're things such as, before I start to draw, working out what is the purpose of this drawing? Why am I drawing it? Where do I want to be at the end with this? And beyond just having a nice drawing, but with this particular drawing, why am I doing it? Why am I using this reference? Or what drawing am I trying to create from my imagination? It doesn't matter where it comes from. And really, if I draw from my imagination, then really that comes from previous things I've seen that I'm now arranging creatively in my mind. So there's that. What's the big picture? And how am I, if it's from a photo, how am I going to adjust or rearrange the photo to bring out the qualities more even that I want? So this is kind of the big picture, the big planning stuff that has to happen. A photo grabs my attention, and the first thing I'm thinking is, why? What is it? Is it strong contrast? Is it an interesting composition? Is there a narrative? Is there a story in here that I think pulls us in to want to know more? Is it simply magnificent, overwhelmingly ornate architecture? But what is it that interests me? Because these all give me a focus now when I draw. These help guide what marks I'm going to put on the paper in a minute. And then I think, what effects am I trying to capture? Now, it may be the effects I see, or it might be the effects I see in the reference, but with some tweaking. So is there a very strong depth of plane, for instance? Is it the distance that I want to capture, or whatever? But is it the cobblestones in front? What is it? What are the elements that I really want to capture? Okay, I have someone saying yes, they need to concentrate better. Um, Baby John saying he's learnt to improve their imperfections. But some pictures he is hesitant to draw, or puts him off. Look, I think there's nothing wrong. In fact, I think it can be wise to look at some things and to think, that's beyond me at this point. It's great for inspiration and motivation for improvement, but there's nothing wrong. In fact, I think it's a very wise thing to stagger what we draw. And even this is part of the brain thing. It's recognizing where I'm at in my learning journey. And I often in my videos talk about a comparison between learning to draw and playing the piano. And no one would think of starting to learn the piano by playing pieces that were too hard for them, because it's just so obvious that you're going to play them badly and you're going to get discouraged. And if you learn anything, you'll be learning bad habits, because you lack the foundations to develop good habits. So choosing appropriate things. I mean, this wasn't actually a point I had written down, but it's a very helpful, very important one. Choosing points, choosing references, subjects that we have a chance of doing well is an important part of the brain process, not to get carried away with our enthusiasm or where we're hoping to go, and not to unrealistically think, oh, I can do that, surely, just because we've seen someone else do it, because we have no idea what it took them or how long it took them to develop that style of their drawing that so engages me. So it is really important also to choose the appropriateness for what I'm able to do well. And that's a brain thing. There's all the strategizing that our brain has to do before we start. When we do a drawing, it's I don't know, it's like building a building. It's a process, and there are different ways we can do it, but there are more helpful ways than others. So, and these do change from artist to artist, person to person, because what's the best way for me to proceed may be different from someone else, and that's based on my experience and yeah, my skills, my specific skills in certain areas might make one way of progressing my drawing better than another for me. Might be different for someone else. But I use the word strategizing. Before we start to put, and all of this is before the pen hits the paper. I really should have brought a pen because I'm talking about the pen hitting the paper quite a bit. But the strategizing needs to take place. And these are the areas that we neglect and rush, I think, all too often, because we're in such a hurry to start to, in our mind, start drawing, particularly if drawing time is precious. We want to rush to get that pen on the paper. And so we're tempted all the time to start to draw with marks on the paper before we've done the brain stuff. And so I'm rushing to make marks now, not really knowing what I'm doing, not really, as in not knowing, not having thought out what, where, how, why. Because with the strategizing, I'm working out now, what marks am I going to use? And some of those marks will be lines and some of them won't be lines. What marks am I going to use? I'm thinking, what materials am I going to use? What materials will give me best chance to create the effect I want for the size of the drawing, for the amount of detail I intend to draw, for the effects I'm wanting to create? Because how large or small our drawing is has a huge impact on how it looks according to all the choices that we can then make. So it's thinking of these things and looking at our past experience with the drawings that we've done to help guide us into what we're going to do. Knowing where to start. I do have one or two videos on where to start a drawing. Now, of course, this is where I start and how I start, and that is an individual thing, and I put it out there in my videos. If this is helpful for someone else, that's great. Or you may work out your own way of where you start, and you learn by experience that for you, this is the starting place, or the sort of starting place in a scene that ends up working best for you. And it often is trial and error. And I certainly would say at the start to practice a lot and look at the results and work out what works. Now, for me, I've worked out with the way I draw, and because I draw directly with ink, I can't do the more common kind of roughing out of larger shapes and then refining them into smaller shapes and adding the detail. I can't do that because every line's going to be there at the end. So I have to have a more measured way of doing it. And I found that choosing something as close to the center as possible, if that's possible, if there's something that's relatively simple to draw and get it in proportion, that's the best way for me to start. But I still have to look at every reference that I'm using for every drawing and think, in this drawing, is there a place in the center, or is the best place to start going to be over here or over here? Or sometimes I start at the top and work down. Occasionally I'll start at the bottom and work up. Even though I prefer to work in the center, and like all of these creative brain choices have to happen before we can actually start to draw. So, well, they don't have to, but if we haven't thought these things out, we don't really know what we're doing when we start. Just a couple of comments here. Baby John, some pictures I look at, my confidence, we read that one. Patrick says, Good evening, Patrick. The term marker's brilliant, makes the act of drawing approachable. It's helped me overcome fear of failure, my bigger challenge. Yeah, look, fear of failure is huge. I've struggled in my life with perfectionism, and yeah, it's a big thing. It's a huge thing to overcome. I've had people tell me that they get halfway through a drawing and they've either given up already because they made a mistake at the start and that discouraged them, or they get halfway through and haven't made a mistake, but the pressure now that they will make a mistake and ruin the artwork is so great that they actually can't go on. They can't, there's too much stress now for the drawing process for them to go on. Yeah, it's a huge thing. I do have some videos on perhaps some ways of thinking or some strategies we can use to help us bump out of perfectionism. Can I just say, I think the best kind of mind thing to help us get out of perfectionism is to stop thinking when we're learning to draw that we're producing artworks, because I think that's where the perfectionism really gets in. You know, I will spoil my artwork. I won't have the thing at the end that I want to frame or whatever sell if I wreck it up, or it'll just discourage me if it's not perfect. Whereas if I was learning the piano and made mistakes, I would just think it was part of the process. I need to understand when I'm learning that I will make mistakes. I'm not producing artworks. I'm learning the full range of everything that I need to know to produce the sorts of drawings that I feel like I have in me. So I think that's really important if we do perfectionism, because it takes the pressure off. If I don't have to have an artwork at the end, if this is just a learning experience, then it doesn't matter if I make mistakes, because that gives me experience then in dealing with mistakes. And that's an important part of learning. How can I cover this up? Can I cover it up? What mistakes do I learn can be so overcome by other things that they're really not noticeable at the end? But equally, there are some mistakes that we really can't recover from, and we probably do need to start again. But in my experience, there's very, very, very few of those compared to the ones that we can overcome. So that's just a little aside on perfectionism and mistakes. But so beyond strategizing, working out how I'm going to start, where I'm going to start, and then how I'm going to progress the drawing, now we start the really hard work of the really careful observation. And this is all still brain stuff. I'm looking at my reference now, and I really have to make some decisions about how I'm going to create the effects that I want. And I'm also looking at where is everything in my reference in relationship to everything else. I'm really looking hard at the proportions, because shortly I will have the ink on the paper and nothing can then be erased. Every mark I put will be there at the end. So I really want to give myself every chance in my observation. And I truly believe that most people don't do anywhere near the observation that they really do need to get the best drawings that they're capable of doing. We look at something, and again, you see, in life, we observe things all the time, and we therefore presume we can. It's not hard to see something. And yet, most of our practice at observation, so what we've learned in observation, has not been for drawing. And we haven't learned that for drawing, we have to observe in a certain way. We have to find certain things in our observation before we draw that we don't need normally for everyday life. I have a playlist with 4 or 5 videos on observation for drawing success. I think 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can really recommend looking at them just to give you some idea of the sorts of things I'm talking about when I'm talking about observation. Glad that was helpful, Patrick. Yeah, people are commiserating with perfectionism and feeling that I can't keep going because I've made a mistake, or if I don't make a mistake, I can't keep going because I will make a mistake and it's too stressful. Yep. We have to just lift all that off ourselves by saying, I'm not producing artworks. I'm learning to draw. And if I was learning anything else, I'd be far more accepting of mistakes. If I'm learning a foreign language, I will sometimes say the wrong words. I'll sometimes stop dead and not know what to say at all. Drawing is just as much a learning experience as this. So I need to observe to work out what exactly it is I'm seeing that I want to draw. And then that combines with all the strategizing and all the working out. See, the problem is that, we want to draw, we have half an hour to draw, we run around trying to find something to draw. That's taken 10 minutes of our time, but less time to draw. And I just want to start drawing because I really feel like the drawing is the pen on paper, and I underestimate all that takes place before. Another way I have of thinking about the mind stuff is that I think of it as when we draw, we're translating. Much the same way if say I was a translator, and let's say somebody was speaking Spanish or German or something, and I was translating it. What I have to do is hear what they're saying, understand it in their language, and then I have to put it in a different language. And some of it might be easy. It might be sort of almost word for word the same. The grammar might be different, and that might change the word order where the verbs come or where the nouns are or what's happening there. Or it might be that what's said actually makes no sense at all in the second language, and I have to totally change what I'm saying to say the same thing. And I think it's exactly the same in drawing, that when I look at my reference, some things we can actually, if you like, translate fairly easily. It's fairly obvious what we're going to do. Let's say, I don't know, lines for walls for the outside of a building or something. But other things may be more complex. It may be a little bit harder. And some things we might have to change completely. So when I look at foliage in a tree on a reference, there's no way I can draw that leaf by leaf, but I can see all the leaves in the photo. I have to find a new way of representing that. In a sense, I'm saying something that's in the photo totally differently with my marks. And so all of this happens in our brain. Now, if I start to draw before I've worked all this stuff out, then I'm drawing blind. And what I'm doing is I'm falling into the same patterns of how I draw, which means my drawings will all start to look a bit the same, and they certainly will all be starting to capture the same sorts of mistakes, or at least weaknesses, because I haven't done the thinking, the brain stuff, the observing, the strategizing, all the choices that need to be thought about and decided before I put the pen on paper. So I'm just doing what comes immediately with those things instead of working it out. And it's deceptive if we watch an artist who has been drawing a lot, whether it's for a long time or perhaps like myself, more intensely for a shorter period, because the brain stuff is the same as the hand stuff in that these are skills that we can learn. It's not magical. It's not magical. It's not the way I was brought up or anything. I had to learn how to do all the brain stuff so that when I put the pen on the paper, I had every chance of success. And skills can be learnt. We can learn how to observe so that we can draw better. That's why I make videos on how to observe for drawing better. We can learn the sorts of options of how we might start a drawing so that when we have one to start, we can juggle the possibilities given what we're drawing and how we're drawing it and make the best choice. If I have things that I can't draw directly, if I have foliage and whatnot, I've worked out different ways that I can create the effect for different sorts of trees at different distances and so forth. And therefore I can choose what works best either in this drawing or in this part of this drawing. So I have all these skills that I call, for want of anything better, brain skills, the brain side, the things that all have to happen before I pick up my pen, before I let the ink touch the paper. But I can learn to do them quickly, just as I can learn to make my marks, not so much more quickly, but more confidently and with less bits of that go nowhere. So we can get much faster at it, but it's not because we're rushing it. It's simply because we've learnt over time what the possibilities are, which ones most likely work best for us, and therefore we're able to put them into practice more quickly. But they've all still had to happen. I still never do a drawing without 2 or 3 minutes of exploratory mark making to see if my ideas of strategizing, of where I might begin, of how I might represent certain details and so forth, if the pen I think is the appropriate size for the scale. I also check the scale and so forth. And all these things um, are part of my brain stuff. They're my final check before I actually commit to start the drawing. And I find it tremendously helpful to do that. I have some videos on that too. Even the series I have at the moment, the 10-minute real-time drawings I do, I still spend 2 minutes before I put the camera on to explore the sorts of marks and things that my thought processes have come up with as the best way to draw. I mean, although the actual drawing is 10 minutes in real time, and these are on a playlist, I designed them as a 10-minute daily drawing exercise for you. Um, but but I do spend my brain time before that. I do find a reference. I work out what it is that makes me want to draw the reference, and therefore what qualities I want to particularly bring out, what visual impact I want to have and why, and then how I might do that, even for a 10-minute drawing. So there might be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 minutes of thinking before the pen hits the paper. And see, this is why copying is such a dead end if I want to learn to be able to do my own original drawings. Because if what I want to learn to do is copy, then that's great. Then copying the work of other artists. Let's not worry about copyright or those issues at this point, but just in terms of what I'm able to learn to draw. You see, can you see the problem? Because if someone was to get one of my drawings and to copy it because they think this will help me learn to draw, what are they doing? Well, they're seeing the marks that I've worked out for my own reasons where to put and how to put them in, but they haven't got to do any of that brain stuff, any of that observation. They just have to put this line and then put this line next to it and so forth. And so at the end, they can end up, if their copying skills are well developed, and if they copy other artists' drawings a lot, they will become better developed because we do improve what we kind of carefully and thoughtfully practice. But if they then go to do their own drawing, they don't know how any of this brain stuff works. And I came to realize this early on when I began to get comments from people, from students, joint students and the like, saying, look, I've done these really great drawings that I've copied from other drawings, and they really encourage me. But then I go to do my own drawing, like from a photo, and I don't even know where to start, let alone be able to do it. And that's because in copying the work of other artists, they haven't learned any of these brain skills. They've really developed a hand skill, a drawing technique more, you know. And so the question is, if I want to learn to do my own original drawings, what way will let me do that to see improvement happen? And I really think it's by working on all of the brain stuff that in the end gives me the information and makes the decisions that then determine where the marks go and why they're going to look the way they are. I think half of the reason we often have fairly wooden line work is because when the hand is drawing the line or making the marks, we're still not sure what we're doing. It's when we have a confidence about where the marks are going and why they're going there and what effect we're trying to create that we can do fairly brisk but confident marks. It's not that we've developed necessarily great skill in drawing. It's the fact that we know what we're doing that gives us the confidence that we need. I truly believe that the technical skills, and look, there are technical skills, but I truly believe that the pen on the paper and the mark making skills are really not so very important, and they're not the ones that are hard to learn. The hard to learn skills are the ones that in our minds tell us how to look, how to strategize, what we're trying to achieve. All the thinking that tells us how we're going to translate this into this, the creative translation process, as I refer to it. Um, yeah. Um, and so my question is, if this is the case, and if you're a self-taught artist, see if I'm doing a course and I have a teacher, then my teacher should be helping me to learn how to observe and how to think. But if I'm on my own drawing journey for whatever reason, and I'm having to find my own materials, it's very easy to just focus on what actually produces the physical thing at the end, the artwork, the lines on the paper, and not to appreciate all of the thinking that comes before. And look, I got to say, I do wonder when I don't very often, but occasionally I'll look at drawing videos, and so many of them have no commentary at all. We're just watching a drawing appear. Sometimes we don't even see the reference. So we can't even work out, why is the artist doing this way? Like, what are they seeing that this becomes the drawing from that? Because that at least will give us some insight, perhaps, possibly, into how they're thinking. But we actually get no information, and the lines just appear by magic. And while it might be entertaining, I'm not sure that it really teaches us anything to help us do more. In fact, it may just make us think, I should just be able to do it because this drawing's just appearing like this. Does any of this make sense to anyone? I'd love to hear your comments about what I'm saying between the brain and the hand, that maybe 80-85% of the important stuff happens in our head, and that's what guides our hand. It guides our hand in that it tells us, gives us the focus of what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, where we're trying to do it. um, and instead, if we don't appreciate that, we're rushing to start the drawing, and so we haven't observed carefully enough, although we think we have, but we haven't really. And if we're lacking a teacher to actually say, look at what you've done, look at the reference. Now, how could you have this angle like this when it's like this in the reference? Or how can you have the proportions like this when it's nowhere like that in the reference? It's not always so easy to do that for ourselves if we don't have experience in being a teacher. I had the great advantage that when I learned to draw as well, that I was a trained high school teacher. And while it wasn't in art, it was English and history, I learned how we learn as part of learning to be a teacher. And I was able to use that skill, the skill of learning how to learn, as I learned myself at a fairly late stage in life to draw. But we don't know what we don't know. And so I can end up choosing a lot of videos that I think should be teaching me how to draw because I'm watching people draw something in them. But I get absolutely no connection with, in my mind, the 85% of the vital stuff that tells me what to do, how to do it, where to do it, when to do it. Does this resonate with anyone? If you're one of the 18 people listening, do you think this could be perhaps the issue for you, that has kind of ended up having all your drawings look the same, and really to have line work that's fairly hesitant? Because if I'm not certain of what I'm doing, then I'm going to end up focusing intensely on the end of the pen, and that's not a good way to draw. We're not going to get lovely, loose, free, crisp lines that way. Yeah, that's covered most of my material for this topic. So I'd love to hear some comments, or if you have any other questions, I have a little bit more time now. If you have any other questions about the drawing process that you'd like to ask me, now's the time. Right? Patrick saying he's learning to see details and shapes instead of merely recognizing thin objects and faces. So learning to see in the most helpful way for me to be able to create the drawings I want is really important. And of course, because of the way I want to draw and the focus I want to have my drawing have, what I need to find might be different from what a different artist with a different style and a different aim in their drawing does. So, I mean, this is intensely personal as well, but we need to learn that we need to learn it. We need to learn that we can't draw what we haven't seen properly. We need to learn that, unfortunately, if we have an inadequate look at our reference and we start to draw, if I haven't really seen what I've needed to see in my reference, where is what I'm drawing coming from? Well, it's coming from my imagination, which is built from past experience. So if I haven't looked at this car at this angle from this distance carefully enough in my reference to draw it properly, then I'm going to be drawing memories of cars that I've seen in the past, and it's not going to match up well enough. G'day, ad hoc art. Yep. Baby John's agreeing with that. Katerina saying, struggle to find a balance between practice to gain skill and still feeling and having fun and can explore. Katerina, have you come across my, I've only been doing these for 4 or 5 days, my real-time 10-minute drawing videos, daily practice. The videos are about 12 minutes, but there's 10 minutes of real-time drawing where I don't edit any of the time out at all. And so, as well as doing a voiceover afterwards where I explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, I'm also leaving in for you to see, if you like, my thinking space. So my pen doesn't dash around all the time as it might look if I've got an hour's drawing that I've got to make into 10 minutes, where I edit out all the gaps and it's 4 or 5 times actual speed. So maybe these videos, and the idea is that you can try and draw it yourself in 10 minutes, and just to see it as a drawing exercise, not as producing an artwork, and to get practice at building confidence, and so forth. But hopefully, I think it will give some insight into my thought processes, that you can then use to develop your own thought processes, the brain side. I mean, I can't show you my brain thinking, but I can talk about why I'm doing things and sometimes how I came to that decision. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks, ad hoc. I'm glad you're liking them. For now, I'm going to try and do, like, post one of these every day to build up a bit of a supply, so that if people do want to try and squeeze them in daily, or as many days as they can have a bit of a run, because I think these are helpful to do. One after the other, and I've got to say, personally, I still, I mean, this may sound a bit strange, but I still have problems sitting down to draw, because I have to kind of overcome the sense of, oh, what if it doesn't work out, that sort of thing. And sometimes I can wander around and just do other jobs for an hour. I find with these 10-minute drawings, there's no pressure. I find I sit down really easily and do them, or do a couple of them in a row. And then I'm going to actually use these, making these 10-minute drawings and 10-minute videos as a bit of a warm-up, so that when I finish that, I can start maybe a more complex drawing that will be a longer video, but is also psychologically more of a challenge to start. Because these 10-minute drawings, they're not to produce artworks. They're a learning exercise. And that's a really important thing. I don't know how it's happened, but I do really feel that for so many of us, we have this pressure that we're making this artwork and I mustn't spoil it. When instead, I'm learning to draw, and hey, that doesn't mean we can't produce artworks, but we're more likely to produce artworks if we're feeling just confident and unstressed. And we're also going to learn to experiment with our technical skills, because with confidence, I can really learn how to draw a line nice and briskly with a nice even movement, or whether it's curves or whatever. If I'm not worried about spoiling something, I can learn to take the risk. How do we learn to dive? You never learn to dive except by taking the risk of whatever, throwing your body out into the air, and come what may, and probably looking stupid, whatever. I mean, there are some things we can only learn by kind of launching ourselves into space, even quite literally, let alone metaphorically. And I think that is the case with drawing and with line work. Um, when when you see an artist who's able to draw lines and position them accurately, quickly, and easily looking, that's come from somewhere. They weren't born with that. That's come from practicing that sort of style of drawing, which is another reason why I think short daily drawings are a faster way to improve. Um, because we can take these risks because we're not seeing it as an artwork. We understand that it's learning. And as we take the risks and we succeed in them, then we're building a skill that we're consolidating and learning and developing. So, again, I mean, this video wasn't meant to be a plug for my real-time 10-minute drawing videos, but I do think they are very helpful for developing so much. They're on a playlist, so you can find them all there together if you want. Okay, that's great. Baby John is just saying that this has explained a lot for him, and me too. Hasn't looked at my 10-minute real-time drawing videos, but will. Ad hoc art. I don't often draw BG or scenes. I prefer character drawing. However, I draw comics. Your videos do help with backgrounds. Your shading is so simple but extremely effective. Yeah, look, I'm always amazed at the comments I get from people whose art is so different to mine in terms of what we produce at the end, but who have been so helped with the way of thinking. And because, I mean, it all comes from the brain. And it's not so much the type of drawing, but it's learning how to think. It's learning the possibilities and some of the possibilities, which from someone else we can learn, and then we incorporate that in all the things in our mind that we already have, but ultimately with all the things, not so much that we've seen, but that we've actually practiced ourselves. I think it's very helpful to find artists whose work inspires us, because it's very, very helpful to be inspired. Firstly, we just get to enjoy looking at great drawings, and I certainly do. And yeah, and when I was in Europe, before I started to draw, I took some photos of some amazing architectural drawings in museums and in galleries, and I found them very encouraging to inspire me to try to create these things that I felt were inside me, but I don't know. But it was never helpful for me to try and sort of copy too much too intensely. I would look at possibly some of the ways they did some things, and then I would put it away, and then I'd have my reference, and I'd say, okay, now for me now, having seen that and looking at this, how am I going to do it? And so the work that's inspired me certainly informs my thinking, but in the end, it's my creative translation that puts the marks on the paper. And as I do that over and over again, it's not just that I improve my technical skills. It's not just that my straight lines become straighter for longer, but I learn when I realize I haven't looked at what I needed to look at to get the proportions correct in something, then the next drawing I do, I'm further down the track because I know I haven't put enough time and effort into really observing and finding the things I have to find to get this right. Or the way I've drawn it, I've had to commit myself too quickly. I've put too many lines that can't be removed too quickly. Because I draw directly in ink, I've learned the beauty, the joy of putting little dots everywhere. When I have a sense of where I think something's going to go, I put a dot. And then I kind of can see that. I can see what it has to join to. And I can visualize, is this looking right? And what I've learned is at the end of the drawing, if that dot's not in the right place and I put another one, or I just draw the line under or past the dot, because the dot lets me now work out where it needs to go. I can use it, if not to join onto, to work out where it needs to go. I've learned that you don't see the dot at the end. And so what's happened is as I've kind of observed and seen the things I've needed to see to be able to draw accurately, it's now forced me to develop the technical skills to actually be able to get that from my reference onto the paper without kind of making ink commitments that are going to be distracting at the end. Thanks, Bede. Bede saying that they saw my video on perspective and subscribe. Look, I have a couple of perspective playlists. I have a like a, I call it a bit like my 10 video perspective course. I think there's 13, 14 videos on it, but it's kind of like a perspective video that's sort of like one video on each of the different perspective areas that I've talked about. So there's like one video on the big picture, what is perspective conceptually. You know, there's one video on what are the problems with those perspective videos. There's one video on perspective for uphill, perspective for downhill, perspective for street curves. There's a video on if all three are happening in the one street, and so forth. There's one on 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective. There's interior perspective as well as exterior perspective. So it's sort of got like, I think there might be one on perspective in shadows. It's sort of got like one video. So if you kind of want to not have to look through the 70 or 80 videos on the big, all the perspective playlist, then I suggest you find that that shorter playlist of mine. That's great, Bede. Yeah. Any more questions? Anyone wants to ask me about anything to do with drawing? We still have a few minutes to go. So if there's something you'd like to know, either about sort of skills or options, or just personally about my drawing journey or experience, now's your chance. Otherwise, we can wrap this up. Did I transition from pencil to ink? That's a good question. I have one or two videos on this question that deal with it. Look, I started with pencil, and I think probably most people do start drawing with pencil. We start drawing as a kid with a pencil, usually. Look, graphite is a beautiful medium, and it has lots of strong points to it. And I started drawing in pencil because I was chained to the eraser, and I like to be able to get rid of the things that weren't right. And you know, that for me, drawing in my past experience as a kid was always with a pencil. However, when I began to be more interested in pencil, in drawing, I began to be aware that so often the drawings that really attracted me were in ink. And I began to really see the possibilities of ink. Now, for me, generally ink line, and therefore hatching at the start. And I just wanted to be able to explore that. And, you know, I mean, I did, when I first started drawing, it was in pencil. Then when I came back home from holidays from Europe, I began to draw for Instagram, and I began to do these really quite large, quite complex drawings. I'll just get one off the wall. If you've seen my Instagram channel, so they're these drawings, and I've done them from drawings of Paris photographers who have given me permission very kindly to draw from their photographs. You actually do need permission of a photographer to draw from their photo legally. There are copyright rights that photographers have, and drawing without permission their photos is an infringement. So and that's why I post all my reference photos on my channel community page for you to use, because I've taken them all myself. They're all my photos, so I can give you permission to use them. And often finding reference material is a problem. And if you don't have much time to draw, you know, it's like when you sit down to watch TV and you scroll through the possible shows you could watch, and it takes 40 minutes and you don't have then time to watch the show. It can be like that trying to find something to draw. So I've tried to streamline that process for people. And now I've talked myself totally, oh yeah, the pencil and the drawing. And I would draw those gridding 4x4 grid on the reference photos, and then with the pencil doing all the major kind of lines, and then inking over the top, erasing the pencil, and then using marker for the tonal areas. But when I started my YouTube channel, I decided I want to teach freehand drawing, and so I had to just work on that, and so I did. The What I would say is I actually don't really think drawing in pencil is a transition to drawing in ink. It's a different skill, and they're different media. I would say, where do you want to end up? Do you want to be doing drawings in ink, or do you want to be producing drawings in pencil? Whichever answer you give, and they're both, or charcoal or pastel, whatever you want to end up, drawing like, that's how you should start. Because the skills that you need, yes, there might be some overlap with some of the skills, but generally the technical skills and the thinking, therefore, because of the different media and their strengths and weaknesses, is different. And so there's no point learning how to draw with a pencil where, for instance, you obviously can erase, where you can get shading elements if you want. If you want to end up drawing with pen where you can't erase, and therefore you have to learn to draw so that every mark, let alone every line, can be there at the end, and it's okay for the drawing. So yeah, start the way you want to end up. That's what I would say. And that way, all the things you learn, all the habits you develop are taking you where you want to go, rather than finding you've become actually quite good at something that you don't really want to do, and you're not very good at the thing that you did want to do. There's been a few more comments here. Chili Ark said, I'm an architecture student from India. Started watching your videos recently. Love how detailed and effective your videos are. I found myself drawing more and better. That's lovely, Chili. Yeah, thank you. That's the sort of comment that a teacher loves to hear. B, definitely watching and practicing my perspective videos. My favorite pen. Look, I use Copic pens, and look, I'm not paid by Copic. They don't give me free pens, unfortunately. I have twice been a monthly Copic ambassador in Australia, where I did get some pens a couple of years ago. But the truth is, I started with Copic because when I decided, no, I'm going to learn to draw in ink, I just went to my local art supply shop and I bought a range of pens, and the Copic ones were the ones that worked best. And because of that, I've just kept using them. Now, I've since discovered they're not as cheap as some other brands are, but I've just been happy with them, so I've kept using them. That's what it comes down to. The paper I use is an Australian paper. It's German paper, but it's made into big art books by an Australian company, Art Tech, and it's 210 GSM drawing cartridge, and it's a nice thick paper. The ink doesn't go through. It's relatively smooth surface. It's not really adequate for watercolor. It's a bit smooth, but it works great with the markers, I find. And yeah, and it's not so rough that the ink, fine pen nibs sort of snag on the texture. So let's have a look. What else am I being asked here? 12th of April is my Bachelor of Art exam. Do I have any tips? Shivari, look, I'm sorry, I'm not an architect. I don't know what's going to be in your exam. So I don't really have any tips, except, look, I wish you every success. And I don't know how important being able to draw is in architecture anymore. I almost did architecture, but I did do English teaching, as I said, instead. At the time, in the late 70s, we were university architecture was transitioning away from hand drawing into the CAD, computer assisted drawing, and the drawing skills, I think, were all eventually sort of ceased to be a part of the course. And a youngest daughter of friends of ours has just become an architect in Australia, and she was telling me that, in fact, certainly in Australia, in the bigger architectural firms, that the ability to produce nice freehand drawings has suddenly become highly sought after because it sort of adds a sense of prestige. It's now a way of showing, being able to do something that perhaps other companies can't do. And so there is a desire to learn to be able to draw architecture well freehand. So look, I hope my videos help you to the degree that the drawing skills are important for your course. Me too. Perspective drawings is my sore point. I keep trying to beat it, but it wins. Look, all I can suggest is to choose simpler subjects. If with any subject, whether it's perspective or not, I would say that if you consistently find that you're not managing to do the same sort of subject, same sort of level, I would really recommend um, winding back what you do. I mean, if again, think of the piano. If I was learning the piano and I'm playing a piece, and no matter how much I practice it, I just can't stop making the mistakes I'm making, then I would say that I don't have the right foundational skills yet to be able to do that, to be able to learn that piece. And so I need to go back to an easier piece, or more straightforward piece, and consolidate whatever skills I need to consolidate. And look, I would say if you're, say, doing buildings, and often grand buildings, and the perspective angles aren't right, then stop trying to draw the whole building. Okay, it's this idea of getting out of our mind the idea that I've got to produce an artwork at the end. I'm learning to draw. And the quickest way to draw, if I'm having trouble with perspective, is to just work on perspective. It's to look at my reference and say, okay, what are the main perspective angles of this building, and to reduce the building just to simple blocks, perhaps, not to get caught up with the columns and the statues and the pilasters and the Corinthian capitals and the sculptures and all of this stuff, but just to focus on the main. Because if I can't get those angles correct, then I'm really wasting my time sticking. Even if I can draw the decorative elements well, I'm drawing them on a flawed building. I need to just work on getting those angles correct, and I can do that far faster if that's all I'm doing. Does that make sense? And I often see drawings, and I mean, Instagram lets you see a lot of drawings by the same person, and I often see that in all of them, the perspective angles don't work, and they'd be far better not trying to draw the whole scene, but just working on the angles, and really, when they've drawn it, being ruthless in comparing the angles with the reference. If you've seen any of my perspective videos, you'll probably notice in most of them, on a reference photo, I'll put a red strip of cardboard at the angle of a perspective line, and I use that to just highlight exactly what is the angle. Now, that's the angle I want to make sure I have on my paper. And so often it's very different. So again, we're coming back to, I need to learn to see the things that I haven't seen. I would say that if your perspective angles aren't right on your building, it's almost certainly you haven't actually seen them correctly on the paper, on the reference photo. And so again, that's a skill you can work on just that, on just looking at perspective angles and drawing the same angle on your paper. What else have we got? Have I used brush pens? Look, I haven't. No, I haven't even used a fountain pen. I've only used my Copic markers. I'm kind of a least resistance guy in some ways. If I'm happy and it's working for me, yeah, I'm still trying to talk myself into experimenting with watercolor, in which case I might use brush pens more, I suppose. Shivari is asking, how can I make my drawing different from others in the exam? Do you mean different from other students? That's a bit hard for me to answer, because I don't know what your drawing looks like, and I don't know what their drawing looks like. Seek to draw the best you can. My advice would be, don't worry about the other students. If you seek to draw the best you can, and if you persevere in all the things that we need to persevere in to learn a skill, but particularly with drawing, or the brain side, the correct focus, the focus of how do I think, how do I see, what information do I need in my head, and what decisions do I need to have made before the pen hits the paper. And then having worked that out, I can then work on the technical skills to actually make my hand do the thing that my brain has worked out that I need to do. Then my drawing will develop, my skills will improve, because the hard part is the thinking. And look, part of that thinking happens after I've done the drawing. Part of the brain stuff comes from critiquing what we've done and going back to our reference and saying, where isn't it right? See, I won't know where I need to focus my learning efforts if I don't do this. If I'm self-taught, if I'm watching videos and reading books and doing my best, then I don't have a teacher to put a red line through this or that, or put a big F or 2 out of 10 or something. But most importantly, I don't have a teacher to show me where the weaknesses are so that I can focus my future learning exercises. So I think it is very helpful to really work hard at trying to work out what doesn't look right. And it can be helpful to show it to a good friend and say, what doesn't look right here to you? They haven't even got to be able to say why, but if they can just say what looks weak to them, because sometimes we've so intensely looked at the drawing and we've so intense the reference, we've so intently, even more intently looked at our drawing, we've kind of got used to the wrongness that we've drawn into it. And so it's not so obvious to us that we've made this mistake, whereas a fresh set of eyes can see it. Holding a drawing up to a mirror and just seeing it flipped can let us see angles that aren't quite right more easily. When I used to do the painting, I would always pay particular attention the first time I would walk into the studio in the morning to look at the painting, because having not seen it overnight, I would often be able to perceive things that I'd got so used to seeing over the hours that I was painting it that I couldn't see the problem with it, or I couldn't see the issue. And that first look was always a really important one to help me kind of, okay, what do I need to do? What from yesterday needs more effort today? Because with a fresh set of eyes now, I can see the issues that I couldn't see before. Let's have a look. Thanks, mate. I had a... Okay, thanks, Ad Hoc. No worries, mate. Are you from Australia calling me, mate? Yeah, I've never had a 4:30 start. I had a paper job that was a 5:15 start when I was at school. And I had a job for 17 years that was a 5:20 start, actually, for that matter, getting up. So I understand it. Yeah, sleep well. Ken saying, loving the 10-minute vids. That's great, Ken. We'll be trying it out on my live streams this week. Oh, excellent. How should I make closer features first? Do you mean like the order in which we draw things? Because like this is one of the brain things. This is part of the strategizing, looking at my reference and working out what is the best order in which to draw this. Now, I have a principle that you always draw the closer things before the further things, but that doesn't mean you have to start with the closest things. It simply means that if a building, say, I might start in the middle of a building, as it comes down to ground level, though, at some point I stop the building and I draw the things that are in front of the building, so then I can draw the building behind. That's the way I do it. And I'll often change pens if the things are more significantly closer, because we see things that are closer more clearly. They have greater boldness, and sometimes, often, I find using a slightly thicker pen helps to give that sense, that visual sense of this is closer. And these are all techniques to create the effect of what we're seeing. Well, they're all techniques of mine to get a sense of depth, that this is closer and this is furthest away and this is in between, but also how we represent things. So I'm actually at the moment, the video I think I'm going to make tomorrow, besides the 10-minute drawing one, is one looking at how, if we're drawing a tree close, in the foreground, in the midground, in the foreground, the different sort of marks that we would use and the different ways that we would draw the same subject to create the effect of distance in our trees. Yeah. So that's an important issue. I hope that was helpful, Shivari. Ken saying he liked the drawing parts of a building at a time video to get the shape more correct. Yeah. I think that is helpful. Ad hocs in Bathurst. It's a lovely city. I was up there last year. I took some photos of the courthouse that I haven't actually drawn yet, so they're still in my inbox of possible subjects. Shivari saying it's really hard for me because I make faraway feature first for and then imagine some bigger, closer things would look good. Yeah, well, Shivari, it sounds like this is where you need to learn not to start drawing so quickly. If you want to have some closer things in the foreground, which can be a great compositional element. I really like a strong depth of plane, that there is foreground and then there's a bit further back and a bit further back and a bit further back. And I think it's very helpful to think in those terms, to actually, when we get a scene, to slice it into layers of close, next close, further back, and so forth. And then to then adjust possibly what we draw with, but certainly our marks, certainly the amount of detail we show, and whatever adjustments will create the effect of distance. The trouble with a photo is it flattens everything. We lose the 3D sense. And because of the amount of detail that it shows, even for things relatively far away, it can actually make it hard to distinguish what's what. And we can look at a sort of a row of trees going back, and in life, it's very clear to see where the trees each are. But in a photo, it's just foliage. We actually lose track of where one tree ends and another tree begins. And these are the sorts of shortcomings of a photograph that with my brain, with that first part, with the right focus on getting sorted all the things I need to get sorted before the pen hits the paper, they're the sorts of things I can undo, the problems that I can undo. I don't have to carry the weaknesses of a photo into my drawing. I can actually improve. I can make clear in my drawing what's not clear in the photo. Okay, Mike's asking me, how can I draw with more form and more details? For me, they look more 2D or it looks flat. Yeah, look, that's a good question, Mike, and it's certainly a focus that I've developed increasingly over the last 12 months. There's two ways we can think of an object that we're drawing, particularly from a photo, and we can either see it as two-dimensional shapes. And by that, I mean sort of like a cartoon where it's not really rounded. We're literally seeing, if we got scissors and we cut out the different objects in the reference photo, then we have a series of shapes, two-dimensional shapes. And when I draw, I try to draw those shapes. And if I get all those shapes correct, then I'm going to get the correct outlines. The problem with that thinking is that unless I'm wanting to draw a very flat two-dimensional cartoon-like image, that's what I'm going to end up with. Because in life, things are not two dimensions. And again, I think we do have this emphasis on outline, which is unhelpful. But again, I think it comes from our childhood watching cartoons, which were all outline. And then when we start to draw as a kid and we're copying cartoons, which is, I mean, we've all done that, haven't we? I used to love copying Scrooge McDuck. I used to fantasize as being as rich as he was. But we're drawing outlines, copying shapes in our reference comics. But real life is three dimensions. You know, there's what is it, height, width, and there's depth. And if I want my drawing to look real, I need to capture a sense of three dimensions. And that's not just in this figure, in this part, this head, but it's also the sense that this head is closer than that painting behind. That in some ways, this has greater clarity than what's in the background. And if there was something, if it was daytime and we could see the house next door, that would be less clear as well. So it's seeing all of this and working out ways that we can create that effect. If you look at maybe what was your name, Mike? Maybe the best way I can explain this, I can't give you a name, but if you look at some of the life drawing accounts on Instagram, Google, search for life drawing, so human figures, and find the really best ones. I guarantee you that what you'll see is they haven't drawn a line outlining the silhouette of the arm or the leg or whatever. That what you'll find is that in some parts the line is grows quite thick and then it can almost disappear. Sometimes it does disappear and they actually haven't drawn a line for the arm at all, but the background value has got so dark that it's silhouetted by the background, and the arm comes into life, into position through negative space. And so by not using an even line, but by shifting the line from being thick and thin to reflect curvature, to reflect lighting, to reflect perhaps what's the word, the kind of how the body is kind of standing and what parts are under stress and what parts aren't under stress, helps to create a really three-dimensional feel for it. That's what we want, whatever our subject is. We want to put marks, and again, this is why I think of marks rather than lines, because marks is a far more generalized term, and I think it gives me more options, more possibilities, if in my mind I think marks and not lines. I'm not trying to outline, but I have to work hard to see in a photo, particularly to really see and to really understand the three-dimensional form and the planes of depth, which things are closer and so forth. And then it's experimenting to see what marks work. And there's nothing wrong with looking at the drawings of artists who you think do it well already and trying to reverse engineer what have their techniques been and trying to use it yourself. But as I said earlier, I would certainly avoid copying their drawings. Look at their drawings, be inspired firstly to think, well, it can be done, and then try and work out how they've done it. Then put their drawing away and get something you'd like to draw. And it can be very similar to what they're drawing. That makes it easier. But seek to put it into practice yourself. And this is the way we learn. And this is the way you'll incorporate the very best of their techniques into your own drawing style. Because believe it or not, you don't want to draw like your favorite artist. You really want to draw in your own drawing style. And it's in each of us. Okay? What's next? Shivari is thanking me for my videos. Look, I'm so pleased to help Shivari. That's why I'm doing them all. Ash K says, hello, hi there. It's easy, Shivari saying, it's easy for me to draw certain shapes from micron pen, but struggling with trees and bushes. Look, Shivari, I have a playlist that's now got, I don't know, it's probably got at least 30 or 40 videos on drawing trees and bushes, anything with foliage. The important thing is that we don't just take the shortcut of adopting a pattern. And that's what I see most frequently. A pattern is used wherever there's foliage, and it ends up looking almost like a pattern paper cut out in the silhouette of the foliage of the tree and just stuck on the, it doesn't really, it's very flat, doesn't give a sense of form. And we kind of end up knowing it's a tree really because of often the trunk and the shape, but it doesn't really look like a tree. What it says to me is, I've been overwhelmed knowing all these leaves are there, and this is the best I could do. Instead of saying, let's stop thinking about leaves. And again, this is all in the head. This is the brain part. This is what this video is about, is having the wrong focus, the focus on getting the ink on the paper quickly. We have to work out what we're doing and why, and the best way to do it first. And so with foliage, and I learned this with painting, but it did carry into drawing, that I need to stop thinking of leaves. I need to look at the effect of light on the canopy, and then seek to find marks, that usually hatching marks, that can create those shadows and highlight those highlighted areas of the foliage, depending on where the sun is. If you look, Shivari, at my tree playlist, yeah, you might find some of those helpful. And I've got a few tree videos that are like very short and very simplified, sort of like 3 different types of trees in like, 5 minutes or something. that really hone down the principles I'm talking about. And then I've got some other videos where I draw quite large, quite complex trees where you get to see exactly the same mental processes applied to a much larger tree. But I really would recommend that. I actually think drawing trees is a strength area of mine. And I think it's come from the fact that I painted trees for 10 minutes, for 10 years before I started drawing. Certainly not 10 minutes. But I learned how to see them. I learned what information I had to find from a tree canopy to get what I needed to be able to paint it. And I found that much of that was the same for drawing it with a pen. Plus, I just love trees. A few other comments here. Ash K saying, really struggles with perspective. Like I get flustered rendering those shapes in my brain. Look, I think we need to learn to observe them. I mean, like, it's not hard to draw a line at an angle, but I have to see the angle. Like, there's a different level of understanding of perspective I need if I'm drawing from my imagination. If I'm creating artificial landscapes, streetscapes from my mind, then I need a higher level of understanding. But probably most of us, most of the time, are drawing either from life or from a reference. And so really, I need to learn to see what's there and not be distracted by, I'll say optical illusions, but often other things that are in the picture also make it harder to see the correct angle. They might make the angle look too high or too low. But I need to practice, and I don't know if you were here, Ash K, before, but I was saying, if perspective's a problem, if getting the angles correct is a problem, I need to work just on that. It's a fantastic topic to just work on, not drawing all the architecture, not drawing the columns and the pilasters and the pediments and the sculptures and the cornices, but literally just drawing the main box shapes and lines until we get them right. Because if I don't do all the other stuff, I can draw this in 5 minutes. I can draw it, 12 times an hour. That's the way to improve. And if I scrutinize every one and really compare hard with the reference, and if it's not right, I do it again until I get it right. I keep doing it till I get it right. I can guarantee if it takes you a dozen times the first time, it won't take you a dozen times the next time, because each of those times that's not quite right is leading you closer to learning how much you have to look where, how, for how long, how intensely before you start to draw. And you will improve on that very quickly. But if you do 1-2 hour drawing of a building once a month, well, it's going to take you a year to get that hour's worth of improvement on getting your perspective angles correct. In fact, probably longer, because you'll forget what you've learned. One of the this is something I haven't mentioned in this video, but really helpful thing is, if you've done a drawing and you're not happy with it, then do it again immediately afterwards if you can, because you start having learned all that you've learned with the one that you're not happy with. And if you're doing my real-time 10-minute drawing video series, daily drawing practice for 10 minutes, this is a great series to do that with, because it's only 10 minutes. And so if after 10 minutes you think, yeah, look, parts of this are good, but I got this wrong and so forth, then do it again straight away and just be amazed at how much better it is. And this is how we learn. We learn by focusing on the areas that we don't do as strongly until we learn them. And if we think of learning the piano, what often happens is that when we go up a level, there are new skills that are required, and we'll be given a piece to practice that will really involve a lot of these new elements, so that we're forced to concentrate on them. But the idea is that what we've already learned becomes now a foundation that we basically have covered. So now we can just add this bit. So it's kind of like that, but it's just working on the particular skills that we need. Yeah. I don't need to, if I just need to work on perspective, I don't need to draw all the decorations. I don't need to draw the trees and the gardens or the background or whatever. I can really fast track getting my head around accurately drawing what I see in the reference if I just focus on that. That's great, Mike. I'm glad that's helpful. Where am I from? I'm from Australia. I'm just on the outskirts of Sydney, on the east coast of Australia. So yeah, we're moving into winter now. Autumn has definitely come. We've just started to have a bit of coolness in the air, and we just had Sydney just had like 150 millimeters of rain in 24 hours, and our water supply is overflowing. We have a dam that can supply water to 5 million people, and it's burst its banks. Yeah, it's funny. People say, "Oh, I like your accent." I think I don't have an accent. It's everyone else who has an accent. Akshay saying, "I just started drawing a few weeks back, and I'm interested in it, but some things just go above my brain. But I love seeing your videos. Thanks for these." Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. And look, drawing's a great thing to be able to do. There's a lot of joy in it, I think, ahead for us all. But the important thing, I mean, and again, one of the problems if we're on a self-taught journey is if we want to draw, particularly if we really like a certain subject. And I think architecture, like if I love architecture, and I do, certainly sort of more neoclassical architecture than perhaps modernism, but I'm going to want to draw the architecture that most excites me, inspires me, and that can be quite difficult, and it can encourage me to start too far down the track, because I do need a greater skill level, not just with the technical skills, but I need all the head stuff that enables you to get your head around what you need to see to do that. And well, I can't do that if I mean, well, it's harder to start at the end. I mean, we don't start to learn the piano with a Beethoven concerto. I don't even know if you did concertos. I actually don't play the piano. I just paid for lots of lessons for my children. But I certainly got to listen to what it sounds like to hear someone learn the piano. And it's a lot of repetition that starts very simply and then that builds on skills by degrees. And it's a great way to learn. And I think we need to, if we're in effect our teacher as well as being the student withdrawing, and we're choosing the material that we use, then we need to choose carefully. And can I say, look, I probably should start to round this off. But can I say that it is really important to choose videos to watch where you get some insight into the artist's thinking, because just seeing the marks they make on paper, as I said earlier, firstly, if you can't see what they're drawing from, I think there's very little point in terms of learning to draw. Now, it can still be very entertaining to watch someone bring a drawing into life, and so that's fine. But if you're wanting to learn to draw, if you can't even see what they're seeing and therefore get some sense of how they're translating it, it's got very limited helpfulness, I think, in learning how to draw. But even if you can see what they're drawing from, it's far more helpful if you get some insight into their thinking. What are the decision makings? What are the decisions that they're having to make, and so forth? And I often, I'm always amused that how much people like to see me make mistakes when I draw, and I often highlight lines that aren't quite right, but then I also show how you don't notice them at the end, because that's part of learning how to draw as well. And again, that's a thinking thing. It's like, okay, this line's not quite where I want it. What are my options? Because there are options, even when you can't erase the line. Yeah. G'day, M. Ash K saying, thanks for the advice. I think you are the only guy here who actually motivates me to just draw and will follow your tips. Well, that's great to hear. And look, can I say, I've been hugely inspired to draw simply by the response to my videos. I wouldn't draw nearly as much if I wasn't making videos, and I wouldn't have improved nearly as much. And so it's been a two-way street. And I was a teacher for 3 years. I had voice problems and I couldn't keep teaching. So I think it's wonderful at this stage in my life. I feel like I've sort of come back and tied up that loose end of being trained as a teacher and not having actually taught much. And the good thing about YouTube is that the people watching my videos want to, which couldn't always be said for the students I was teaching English to back in the 80s. Okay, look, are there any last minute questions before I go? It's an hour and 29 minutes and 38 seconds, so that's probably long enough. But if there's just one more thing that someone's desperate to ask me, then that would be fine. Otherwise, we'll close off here. Anything? I don't know what sort of time lag it has between my saying something such as that and someone typing away and it actually appearing on my feed. But look, I think, oops, one of the few channels that offers valuable artist insights regarding how to approach drawing subjects. Well, that's great. Thank you. That's it's always nice to have, always encouraging to have a kind comment like that. It's always good to know that it makes a difference to people's drawing. How can I find the proportion stuff? It always confuses me. Look, Mike, you have to see it first. And again, I would say if proportions is a issue for you, it's much the same as what I said about perspective. Find some subjects that are relatively simple and just work on the proportions. Just work on getting the proportions correct. Don't worry about complications, decorations, whatever. Keep working on the proportions. And probably the best way to do it is to start trying to draw it the same size as the reference, because that's the easiest way, and then work at making the proportions larger or smaller. So for instance, if you whatever shape you might start with, do it the same size as on the reference, but maybe in the next one do it the same shapes again, the same object again, but make it double or half the size. So it's half the height and half the width will give you a half size. And if you then do the rest of it on that scale, it should be, the whole drawing should be half the size. So yeah, but just focus on proportions. And again, you can consolidate the attention, you consolidate the brain stuff that has to happen. What I think is the 85% of a good drawing is thinking the right way, seeing the right way, working out what you're trying to do, and then working out how might that happen, strategizing the drawing process from start to finish, where to start, how to progress, what you're going to do first, paying attention to things like, well, these things are in front and I need to stop drawing this building or whatever it is, and then draw those or whatever. All of these things that I think are the things that give you the largest place of improvement. Because if we haven't worked out what we're trying to do, why, when, where, how, then we're just rushing to make marks almost blindly. And we're not going to have confidence. And that's going to affect how the lines look. We're going to fall into bad habits because we're not challenging what we're doing and we're not trying to refine our process. And we're probably going to get bogged down in how to draw videos that are very much tips and hacks and quick way to do this, and without understanding the thought processes that we need, we're always going to be struggling. Drawing is not easy. No one would expect to learn to play the piano in a month, 6 months, 12 months. And yet we can expect somehow to learn to draw well in a short period of time, simply because we really want to. I don't know. No, it's not like that. It's like learning anything. And but equally, the rewards are great when we get there. And we can have fun on the way. And if we particularly choose subjects that are appropriate for our drawing level, then we can enjoy it. We will get satisfaction. just because I can't draw the front of the Musée du Louvre doesn't mean I can't enjoy drawing a simple log cabin somewhere. And so I need to work on subjects that I can do well. And if I can't do well, then I know I need to keep going back to a simpler subject. And so, in a sense, let my results help guide where I'm at. But it's certainly possible just to work on certain things, such as proportions or perspective, without drawing the whole building, let alone the whole scene, and to really learn how to see what we need to see, and then how to translate that onto the paper. That's okay, Ash K. I do hope to do some more. Me too. I think I could have coped with you as a teacher. You do. I'm not sure. I don't think you could have at the time. I think you'd have been throwing things at me. Uh, Hello, AMD. I'm afraid you just woke up in time for me to say goodnight. It's 9:30 here. Is it? It's probably a little bit. It's 9:43. Goodness, it's almost 9:45 at night, so it's time for me to go to bed. Look, I'm sorry. I don't really no. I don't have any books on perspective. I can only recommend my perspective playlist. Oh, look, actually, no, that's not true. I can recommend some books, and that's by an American lady, Stephanie Bauer. It's Stephanie with an I at the end, and Bauer, Bower. She does the most beautiful urban sketches, and she loves particularly location sketching in pencil with watercolor applied over the top. She is an architect, and she but she does architectural drawing as part of her architectural kind of career, but she also teaches and urban sketching, and she has books on perspective. I've seen a couple of her books. One of my drawings is in one of her books, which is why I've become aware of her, and I got a copy of that. But I've seen some of her other books, and yeah. So it's sort of perspective that's really angled for the urban sketcher. So Stephanie Bauer, I would recommend you having, and she has quite a lot of books on drawing, street urban sketching, drawing on location in particular. But there's a few books that are specifically on perspective. So yeah, yep. Okay. All right. Look, thanks everyone. I've really enjoyed tonight. I didn't really feel up to it at the start. I thought I might just go for half an hour, but it is inspiring talking, and I love the interaction. So yeah, good night, everyone. Yep. Keep at it and keep having fun. I'll see you next time. Bye. Trying to get the mouse on the right spot. End.